looking at the Mughals. We'll go a teeny bit past these dates, just mentioning what happens. But the Mughal Empire is really cool because they start at the very end of like the quote unquote medieval period, and they go up into modern times. I mean, they're gonna go and do battle with the British Empire, which is pretty cool if you ask me. Thinking about just on a time kind of idea. So when we talk about the Mughal Empire is going to be the two blue periods at time. The Maranthas are going to have part of southern and western India, but there's also going to be times where they're going to be ruled. This is going to be ruled by the Mughals, like you see under Shah Jahan and Aurangzeb there. So the Mughal Empire is going to be its biggest around 1700, which is out of our purview, but we're still going to talk about them because we're basically going to be getting most of the rise of the Mughals. But they're going to control the vast majority of India, which, I mean, India is really, really, really big. It's one of those things that it's way bigger than most people think it is because we know with how map projections are, things closer to the equator look smaller on the map when we have a sphere for a world and then we try to flatten it out so things in the north and south pole look way bigger than they are and things closer to the equator look way smaller than they are. So India is huge, huge, huge. And I would say, if for those of you writing things down, you're awesome, but don't write anything past the extending from present day Bangladesh in the east to the Balochistan in the west, Kashmir. Don't write that. You can write that they were later defeated by the British. But you need to have the idea that the Mughals are going to control India, which is a big, big feat. And they're going to be very rich because of it. So you just need to know the Mughals are big, ruled almost all of India. All right. So the real end date of the Mughal Empire would be 1858, which I probably need to switch that just on the front instead of just talking about the dates that we're talking about, but whatevs. Now, we discussed this in our Do Now time. Mughal literally means from the land of the Mongols or from the Mongols. These are going to be the descendants of Timur, who is a descendant of Genghis Khan. The Ilkhanate Mongols are going to go and eventually conquer India, and that's where we get our Mughals. And we have this really, really cool blend of Indian and Persian cultures, which actually is going to kind of become like an architectural way of northern India. We're going to wind up seeing a lot of the things hold over from that. So it's going to be pretty interesting. And since they're Mughals, we know they're descended from Genghis Khan. And we're going to have an interesting situation here that's going to be very different than what we've seen in the past for the Mongols, which kind of also shows them as being a different kind of group. We talked about how the Mongols would go and assimilate into their cultures, adopt the same religions, and all that kind of stuff. Well, the Mughals, they kept their religion of Islam, and where most of the people were Hindu in India. We know that India is going to be a very, very diverse country with languages, religions, and all sorts of different cultures being in there because it's so big. So with this here, the Mughals are going to keep their religion of Islam while the people are going to stay Hindu for the majority. There'll be some Buddhist, some other religions in there. And it's going to cause some strife, some friction going in forward, depending on the ruler. And we're going to get into those kind of details later on in the unit. And the empire, I apologize, is started by a man named Babur. Some historians will call him Barber, but Babur, I believe, is a closer representation of what his mama called him. And Babur is going to be pretty incredible with how he is going to wind up defeating a much larger army and be able to, with a smaller group. Sorry, I need to be muted for 1 second. Yeah, no, just I trust you. Sorry, Mrs. Kenny needed me for a moment. Um, so, anyways, so Babur is going to be in this situation where he wants to conquer India, but there's going to be a man, the Sultanate of Delhi, or the Sultan of Delhi, and Delhi is going to be an important city, and he's going to have an army of like over 100,000 soldiers. He's going to have all of these war elephants, but relatively low technology, whereas Babur is going to have a much, much, much smaller army, but he is going to have guns. And we're going to see that guns are going to beat even large, large groups. So this is typically where I would like totally nerd out on a chalkboard and or black or dry erase board and like draw what happens here. And I'm going to do my best on the computer, and we'll see how that works. So the most famous battle is going to be something called the Battle of Panipat, which I think that's kind of close to how it's spelled, Panipat. And what's going to happen is here we have the Sultan of Delhi with roughly 100,000 soldiers. He has war elephants, all sorts of ferocious things. But Babur knew that the Sultan of Delhi was like really full of himself and really thought he was like the greatest thing ever since sliced bread. So Babur is going to trick him. He is going to go and put like a small little army out in front to go have them come out. So like we have Babur is going to just put a couple men out in front. And then the Sultan of Delhi is like, well, I'm going to crush them like little puny flies that they are. But Babur, like throughout the night, had like gone and prepared like this huge kind of defense. So on this side, he's going to have like all of these carts, and he's going to have cannons. And then over here, he's going to dig a trench and make it so that basically no one can go get through there. And on that side, he's going to have guys with like bows and arrows and guns. And so he's going to have his main army here. And so then the Sultan of Delhi comes out with this big, big stinking army. They're going to be trapped in this little area. And Babur is shooting cannons at them, shooting the guns, shooting arrows. And here they have the soldiers right in the middle. And I just pointed to my screen. Not that any of you can possibly see where I pointed to. And what happens, though, is there's all those elephants that the Sultan of Delhi had. And has anyone, like, what happens, what do they say about elephants, besides that they never forget? What do they always show in the cartoons happening with elephants? Does anyone remember or can think of it? Whenever you see an elephant in like a cartoon, besides saying, oh, elephants never forget, is there something else that they always stereotypically talk about with elephants?
They get like really scared.
Exactly, Jacob. Oh man, this in sci-fi. What? Yeah, but they get scared easy. Like you always see in like cartoons, like a little tiny mouse comes by, and like the big elephant like always like curls up on itself and gets scared. And it's true though. Okay, these elephants, the soldiers, had never heard or seen a gun before. And so the elephants had never heard these loud noises too. And it's going like crazy. The cannon, the gunfire, the screaming, the shouts. And those elephants were all behind Babur's men, or not Babur's men, the Sultan of Delhi's men. And so those elephants, so if this whole big block is the Sultan of Delhi with all of his 100,000 guys and those elephants are in the back, the elephants start stampeding. And the elephants go right through all of the Sultan of Delhi, squishing and squashing them. So Babur winds up having like 10, 12,000, maybe 15,000 men against an army of 100,000, and he totally wins the battle, like hands down, like annihilates the enemy, mostly because he was smart. Like it's not that he had the guns, which helped, the cannons, which helped, but he only had a few. But it was the fact that he knew the strategies. So Babur is going to be considered like one of those military genius types. So that's what we say when we say with tactics. Sorry, I get really excited when I start doing like battle stuff, because battle stuff is pretty interesting to me. All right. So yeah, he used guns, cannons, but he used swords, spears, all that good stuff. And why does he come to India? Because India was rich. Like we mentioned before, India had not been conquered and pillaged like so many other places in the world. India had been a continuous civilization for thousands and thousands of years. So they had lots of gems, lots of gold, lots of silver, and they had something that nobody else in the world had at this time: diamonds. India was the only place known at this time in the world. And now we know that they're in Africa. There are not many places, but particularly Africa. I mean, they're so common in Africa. There are literally places that you could like go like bend over on the ground and pick up a diamond. But those places are, you know, walled off, and there are people like with like guns that will shoot you if you try to do it. So don't do it. Yeah, Simon. 15,000 guys won over the 100,000. Babur had a super tiny army, and he still won. But India had the only diamonds in the world at this time, and Babur wanted them. So he took India. Also, you know, something that probably you're all familiar with, you've probably all seen pictures of, heard of, the Taj Mahal, that was built by the Mughals. And it was a tomb for Shah Jahan's wife, whom we'll talk about that whole situation later on. Although there is this really cool theory, and I was talking to Amir's mom about it one time because there's a lot of differing opinions about it. That some people think that the Taj Mahal was like originally like a Hindu temple, and then it got converted because there's lots of like interesting things about it, and like these doors that are never allowed to be opened. It's very, very interesting, but you know, we don't know. Current history says it was built by the Mughals under Shah Jahan's reign. We'll get to more of those theories later on when we actually talk to the Taj Mahal, because there's like really cool like intrigue going on about it. And you know me, I love intrigue. So, Mughal Empire from the Mongols, started by Babur, who was a military genius using technology tactics, and he came for the riches of India. And they did such like great things like build the Taj Mahal. Check this out. This is a war elephant, my cherubs. Yes, a war elephant. Imagine how frightening. So one of the things that the Mughals have become famous for. Now, the Sultan of Delhi did not have his elephants looking this awesome. The Mughals are going to say, you know, elephants are great. They're really, really scary on the battlefield. And think about it. Most people haven't seen an elephant in the real life back then. And this big, giant elephant goes running toward you, wanting to squish or squash you. Scary. Now, imagine they were like the ancient tanks of the time. Imagine now they go and cover it with armor. So it's even harder to kill because like there's a thing called an elephant gun because elephants have such strong, thick skin that like regular bullets won't get through. So forget about a bow and arrow or something like that. Now it's covered with steel plate. Other cool things. They would go and because you guys can see my mouse, right? Yeah. They would saw half the tusks off and then replace it with the same length of double-edged swords. Yeah, that's right. They would replace the half the tusk with swords, folks. I mean, how cool is that? And on the top, of course, you have like people like with bows and arrows and spears like going and ruining people's days, making people look like Swiss cheese. They would train the elephants. So like when the army is marching and they're going through like a forest, like wrap its trunk around trees and like move the trees. So they would use them like as like ancient excavators. They would train the elephants like if they're in battle. So let's say Sahil was battling against the Mughal army with elephants. They would like train the elephant to like have one of its giant feet like step on Sahil's toes. So like Sahil is like stuck and probably like in tremendous pain because it's like, ow, this elephant stepping on my foot, like yowzers. But then on the opposite leg to wrap its trunk around the opposite leg and just, yeah. Sorry, Sahil, that probably would have ruined your day. But yeah, so they like use these as like crazy weapons. We don't have to write anything here. There's just a quick timeline about some of the Mughal leaders that we are going to be looking at. So we are only focusing on the ones that are going to be bolded. Babur, Akbar the Great, Shah Jahan. We're going to talk about a little bit about Jahangir, a little bit about Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb is really going to be the end. We're going to have roughly 152 years of just total decline after Aurangzeb. We're not going to worry about any of the rulers there. Aurangzeb kind of like starts the downward trajectory for the Mughals. So this will be our last slide where we talk about Babur. So Babur, like I said, he was going to be the founder of the empire. We talked about his skills. So really, this is kind of this is a little redundant. So you might not need this. And I don't care where he made the capital, but he's going to be the guy who takes over all of northern India. But it's one of these interesting things. We keep on talking about these awesome conquerors like throughout time. And all of them are going to die relatively young and like relatively suddenly. Like so, Babur, he's going to only rule for 4 years. So we don't actually know if he would have been a good emperor or ruler or not, because basically he came in, he conquered, he conquered, he conquered, he conquered, then he died. So we don't know. Like he didn't go and establish a lot going on, and thankfully, his son's going to do an okay job, but his grandson Akbar is going to be an amazing ruler. Whenever you see the great, you know that they're going to be a really um, good guy, good at ruling. So yeah, so we don't really know much about him as a ruler. One of the things that I also love about this unit, which I think people can really appreciate, um, is we're going to find that the Mughal and Ottoman empires and the Safavids are going to be the unit of having the greatest hats. I mean, check out this amazing headwear. And let me tell you, every ruler we're going to see is going to have a fantastic hat. So something for you all to look forward to as we go through this. The blank look on your two faces as I talk about something as awesome as hats. Ugh, no respect. But anyways, my cherubs, that is the notes for the day. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Sorry, Sahil, for having you get torn apart by an elephant. Ouch.